Hey everyone, welcome back to 10 Point Turns. Today I wanted to walk you through my 5-round tournament experience from a GT that I recently attended in early August. This is the first time I will be making a tournament recap video like this, so please let me know if you want to see more of it in the future. I am headed to the Nova Open this Labor Day weekend, so please let me know in the comments if you want to see a recap of that as well. Let's jump into the video. If you are unfamiliar, most Age of Sigmar competitive events are split into two formats, singles and teams events. Teams is a great format that has a ton of strategy revolving list building and matchups and all sorts of fun stuff. Singles is exactly what you think it is when you think of a tournament. A bunch of people entering with their army and their list, and then playing against a random opponent for however many rounds. Single tournaments are usually split into two different lengths. One-day events, or RTTs, are 3-game events that take place all on one day, and 2 to 3-day events, or GTs, which are 5 or more games played over a weekend. This past tournament I attended fell into the latter category, consisting of 5 games, 3 on Saturday and 2 more on Sunday. But before I just jump right into the games, I want to give you the context of the whole experience, which started bright and early on Thursday morning. Before the tournament can begin, we have to get there. Now, I start my drive from a quaint town in the mountains of Virginia, through both West Virginia and Maryland, across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, and find myself at my friend Ian's home in Connecticut. We started our journey into the Age of Sigmar together while in college, and despite the distance, we see each other every other month to play at a store local to him. Thursday was spent enjoying a hobby night at the Portal, the awesome local game store that hosts these events, and definitely deserves all the flowers for putting on such an awesome event and consistently doing it all the time. I had a great time basing the Fire Dwarves for another player getting his army ready for the tournament and just relaxing after a 9.5-hour drive. So, we had a great time, grabbed dinner after the hobby night, and then hit the hay before the final day of prep. I chose to prepare and take my Stormcast for this tournament and for the Nova Open later this month. I wanted to have a strong performance, and have a chance to win every game, no matter the matchup, and I figured that SCE would have the best chance to do that. So let's walk through the list, what the units do, and how it all meshes together to do what I want it to do in-game. Let's start with the man on the bird, Yrden the Witness. With the new Scourge of Ghyran rules, Yrden's new scroll gave him a breath of fresh air, and has given him strong tools to serve as a buff piece for friendly Ruination troops with his prayer to increase the rend of melee units for the turn. He also has a strong melee profile, and can hold his own in most combats with his rampage to kickflip around units while giving out a -1 to hit. His movement tricks, being a Priest 1, and 12-inch flying move really helps late game as well to score objectives and complete tactics. The Lord Terminos finds himself in Yrden's regiment, carrying both enhancements for the army. He is a key defensive piece for the list, as not only does he slap in combat with his monster melee profile for a foot hero, he can also chain activate reclusions to fight after he does with a +1 to hit. This, paired with the Quicksilver Draught enhancement, which gives a hero a once per game strike first, can punish your opponents for charging him and his armored boys. He also carries legendary Tenacity, which lets him ignore death once per game on a 3-up. To accompany the Terminos, 6 reclusions surround him and serve as the defensive anchor of the list. They are 3 health apiece, with a 3-up save and a strong attack profile, accentuated by the Crit Mortal tag. They are often the recipient of the sub-faction ability to give a Ruination unit a 5-up ward. They are a brick wall for a lot of armies, as they also use their 3-up Shrug ability to ignore opponents' spells or rampages. Serving as our first Hammer unit is a reinforced unit of Prosecutors. These guys are super fragile, but take buffs super well and can reliably strike anywhere on the table with their 3d6 charge. They are also a great target for Heaven's Sent, which is a once per game Stormcast ability to bring a unit back at half strength. Rounding out the General's regiment is a reinforced unit of Vanguard Paladors with Starstrike Javelins. These boys are fast. They have a 14-inch base move and the ability to run, retreat, shoot, and charge in your turn. They have a decent shooting attack with the ability to shoot again on the charge into a unit that the Paladors have charged. 5 health apiece on a 3-up save with a potential to move 20 inches and shoot another 12. On paper, these guys are just ridiculous, and another great target for Heaven's Sent. We will get back to these guys a little later. The second regiment is helmed by a Lord Veritan, who stands proudly with his flaming staff praying for Sigmar's grace. He is a Priest 1, and gives more options to buff Prosecutors with Bless Weapons or Reposition with Translocate. He is a surprisingly slappy little hero, and has some solid anti-wizard tech with a -1 to cast aura. Quest or Soulsworn serve as another defensive and utility piece, with the exact same defensive and offensive profiles as Reclusions, except for the lack of crit mortal weapons. They also select an objective in deployment wholly outside of friendly territory to Quest Mark, which gives the unit a 5-up ward and +3 control score when they're contesting that objective. They also have a once per game teleport, which they can use at any time, even in combat, to get across the battlefield or to a better position. Rounding out the list is a unit of Vigilers, which are an essential buff piece. They give a +1 to hit against all enemy units damaged by their shooting attack for the rest of the turn. They are great to drop in from Deep Strike, damage a key enemy piece, and then serve as a screen and continual buff piece. So that's the list. Or, well, the units in the list. Importantly, I am in the Sentinels of the Bleak Citadel's battle formation, which allows me to put a 5-up ward on one of my Ruination units every hero phase that lasts till the end of turn. I also have my battle traits, which I already mentioned were Heaven Sent. I can also give one unit per turn, per game, a +1 to wound and save, making it their finest hour, and I can deploy in the Celestial Realms at the start of the game to Deep Strike units in later. I also have the Stormreach Portal, our unique faction terrain, that allows me to teleport a unit that is close to it anywhere on the board in my movement phase. For tactics, I selected Restless Energy and Master the Paths. This gives me a lot of flexibility throughout the game, and some consistent tactics to score using my superior mobility with the army. I really like the second and third tactic on Master the Paths, which, when unlocked, is super easy for SCE to do. Restless also really synergizes well with my unit of Quest or Soulsworn and Paladors that really want to use teleports or insane movement to steal objectives that were previously controlled by the opponent. I know this was definitely a lot of information. If you're newer to Age of Sigmar, I hope what I've just run through was digestible. It is very similar to the rundown I give players in my competitive events when explaining my army. Thankfully, Stormcast Eternals are the poster boys of the game, so most people have interacted with them in some fashion. So, we know everything we need to know about the list. So, how did we go about prepping for the tournament? With one night to go before the tournament, Ian and I set up a makeshift gaming board on top of a pool table in his garage to get a practice round in and talk deployments. As I have emphasized in past videos, deployment wins games. If you have an hour to prep for a tournament, look at the battle plans and think about how you would want to deploy on that plan. Even having an inkling of what you would want to do will help so much once the first round clock starts ticking. Of course, every game's deployment is partially reliant on your opponent's army and how they decide to deploy, but there will be some constants in your game plan, and identifying those on a per battle plan basis is a huge step towards saving yourself a lot of mental stress and time at the start of the game. For example, our first map we deployed for was Passing Seasons, which has one objective in each large battlefield quarter and deployment zones in diagonal quarters. This was a great test in threat range assessment and understanding how much of the battlefield we each needed to control in order to have a successful game. This is what our deployment looked like by the time we were complete. Here's a quick photo I snapped of our deployment for this video. I have pretty firmly huddled my army in the back corner, with my Paladors, which are represented by the gray plastic slick blades, and a Cavalier Marshal, because I was borrowing the Paladors for the event, off to one side to pressure that flank. Notably, only my Vigilers are in the sky, with the Prosecutors starting on the board screened out by my army so they can receive buffs and then go in using the portal. Ian's deployment is similar, as he uses 2 units of Clan Rats to block both the central lane and to mirror my Paladors in the southwest corner of the board. All of his important pieces sit within an inch of a place of power or obscuring terrain, which keeps them safe from my shooting threat. As you can see from his turn 1 Gnawhole placement, Ian is about to attempt to capitalize on an error I made in deployment. The error I made here was pretty simple. I had only worried about his threat range if he did not choose to aggressively teleport forward and attempt to remove a key piece of mine early. Since I didn't respect this idea, I had placed Irridan exposed next to my terrain piece, which can give him an ideal charge target, since his Rat Ogres would need less than a 9-inch charge to eventually get into combat with Irridan. I could have mitigated this by more fully screening out my terrain piece, or used a unit to screen it out instead of my key monster hero that is very frail. Ian went for the play to pick up Irridan in his first turn, which would remove a lot of my tech and ability to really buff things up to the point where they could reliably destroy his units. However, in attempting to exploit my mistake, he makes one of his own. He sends the Brood Terror through the Gnawhole as well, assuming that the Rat Ogres would need both his buff and possibly his shooting as well in order to confirm the kill on Irridan. After a shooting phase that does not do enough damage, he charges the terrain piece next to Irridan, and chooses not to pull him into combat in order to either make me countercharge and spend 2 command points, or take the full brunt of his attacks on his terms. So, in not only leaving Irridan out of combat, but also bringing the Brood Terror along for the ride, I was able to countercharge Irridan away from the Rat Ogres, towards the Brood Terror, and then use Iridan's Rampage in order to get completely away from the ogres that definitely would have eaten Iridan for lunch. The turn ends with Iridan striking down the Terror after taking a decent bit of damage, and Ian's Rat Ogre tearing down my portal for good. The game continues on, as we both jockey for control in the center of the board while trading the southwest objective back and forth. Eventually, I was able to crack through his Plague Furnace on a turn where the Screaming Bells -1 to hit was not up, and I slowly squeaked out the win, scoring most of my tactics and just keeping enough on the board in the late game. The reason I wanted to highlight this practice game was really to show how easily games can swing one way or the other just based on deployment and what happens in turn 1. We both can make errors that don't even seem like errors in the moment, that cause a player to take an early lead that can seem insurmountable by turn 3 or 4. However, the biggest thing this practice game did was help us shake our nerves about the event the following day while practicing in a real situation. So we went ahead and practiced deployment for the other 4 plans, talking through our reasonings for each placement in regards to the battle plan, whether or not you were playing to the underdog ability, and reacting to your opponent's deployment strategies. This was a ton of help, both on Friday to discuss and actualize some of our thoughts with each other, and proved fruitful during the tournament to have a plan going into the games. So, after concluding our prep, we drove to the airport, grabbed dinner, and picked up James, the third person joining us for the weekend and the tournament. We make it back to Ian's house, run the same deployment practice with James that Ian and I did, and then get ready to hit the hay for a good night's sleep for the tournament. Today's the day. We are all excited as we hop in the car and make the 30-ish minute drive down the highway. No matter how many games or tournaments you play in, it just doesn't get old. Each tournament day is always so exciting as you never know who or what army you'll play. As we drive, we set personal goals for the tournament to both set expectations for the weekend and what we're trying to accomplish. We can't all go 5-0, after all. Our goals are pretty simple and need a bit of contextualizing, since we all played in this event last year, with the same factions for each of us. James went winless with a tie and 4 losses, Ian went 1-4, and I had managed to pile up my list to a very lucky 4-1. Our goals reflect our previous performance and increased skill level in the past year. James just wants a win, Ian wants to go positive, shooting for 3 or more wins, and I want to repeat my success, going 4-1 or better. More than anything else, our goal was to have fun. We and everyone else in this hobby spend so much time and money to play. It is essential to enjoy ourselves and have fun no matter what. Winning is, of course, the goal, and definitely accentuates the fun, but not everyone can go 5-0, just like I said. So now, we've gotten to the event, consumed our breakfast, have checked in, and are ready for round 1. Steve, the awesome TO for the event, makes a quick announcement at the beginning reminding people about the time limits, lunch, and dice down rules, and then releases pairings. Let's get into what you've been waiting for. Game 1. Our first opponent is Kyle, a Sylvaneth player with an absolutely gorgeous army, rocking 5 beautiful centerpiece models and nothing else. He has Alariel, Scourge of Gyran Drycha, Lady of the Vines, Belthanos, and a Spirit of Durthu. No screens, no real anvils, just 5 monsters that excel with hit-and-run tactics, healing a ridiculous amount after striking and fading back to his home set of trees. However, if you can catch them, and keep them from hitting you first, you can force Alariel to roll her 4-ups to try and stay in the game. Oh yeah, the biggest rule is that Alariel can bring every unit, even monster heroes, back once per game per unit on a 4-up in the movement phase. Once per game, she can even bring herself back on a 4-up. It is a game that can easily get out of hand if you either cannot kill the Sylvaneth heroes, or if Alariel is hot on those 4-ups. So, after deployment, he has spread his heroes to cover against any deep striking for me, and I have castled pretty far back in the corner, using the reclusions to sit on my home objective, while Iridan and the Lord Veritan accompany my prosecutors, ready to buff them up and send them in. The questers are within running distance of an objective, and the paladors are deployed as close as possible to my opponent, flexing their 20-inch threat range. Now, round 1 is on Passing Seasons, which is the game I had practiced the night before with Ian. Importantly, the scoring involves the opposing diagonal pairs, and has a seemingly strong underdog that can increase ward saves for units, heal them, or give units a +1 to wound while contesting the objectives. However, the biggest twist is that the objectives that get the underdog bonus are not the objectives that can be scored for the turn. So it comes into play less than you'd think, since both of our armies are fast enough to just play on the objectives that matter. So my objectives going into the game are pretty simple. I need to take first, eliminate as many key pieces as possible early, and make him waste his turn trying to bring back heroes that won't be able to move the turn they set up. If I can keep him stuck in his deployment zone, and allow my slower overall army to move out and claim the other 3 objectives, that would be great. It will open me up to a double turn, but I have defensive tools to prevent a truly devastating double. Also, Kyle is running Intercept and Recover, which incentivizes me to get him in a position to take the double, which removes a token from one of my units, denying him 5 points for a tactic. After we shake hands and get ready to go, cover all the important army rules and etiquette stuff, like what dice we are rolling and how we count health and stuff like that, and I select the 3 treasures to put on my units for Intercept and Recover. I chose the Quester, the Reclusions, and Iridan. I decide to take the first turn. For me, this is a huge turn, and I need to pick up multiple monsters to get off to a good start. I auto-run and launch my Paladors up the field, teleport my Quester to the southwest objective, drop in my Vigilers, and relocate my Terminos and his Reclusions to the northeast objective. I keep my other heroes and prosecutors back to serve as a second wave when needed. Moving to my shooting phase, I put all of my shots into Drycha, as she has an anti-charge ability, which I do not want affecting my Quester's already difficult 9-inch charge into Durthu. I lower Drycha to a couple of health left, and then prepare to charge. I make the short charge into Drycha and activate my Palador's charge phase ability to shoot again into Drycha and remove her from the equation. I then roll the Quester's charge and manage to hit the 9-inch charge into Durthu. In return, he countercharges Alariel into my Paladors to try and prevent me from removing Durthu as well. I fight into Durthu with the Questers first, and only deal like 6 damage after only getting like 5 wounds from the 19 damage to attacks. Alariel slaps my Paladors, picking up 3 of them, and then they fail to kill Durthu, as he picks up a couple of my Quester on his activation in return. I score my Master of the Path tactic to kill a hero, and 5 points for one of the Gnarl Root objectives. This was a big turn for me, as I have removed a major piece of my opponent's army, even though I failed to pick up Durthu as well. I have unlocked a major part of my tactics tree by killing a hero, and kept my opponent from scoring an easy Restless Energy first step by not capturing the empty objective south of his territory. Now I need to survive his turn. His hero phase was pretty uneventful, as most of his casting whiffed, and Alariel miscasted after getting her first spell off to set up a Wildwood in the bottom central area of the board. In the following movement phase, he positioned Balthanos and the Lady of Vines to punch my Vigilers in the middle of the board, and Alariel hit the 4-up to return Drycha and set her up by the trees that she had summoned in the hero phase. He makes his charges with Balthanos and the Lady of the Vines, and Drycha stays put to control the objective. In the combat phase, Alariel picks up the remaining Paladors, but Durthu fails to fully remove the Quester Soulsworn, and strikes and fades away to safety at the end of the turn so he can heal and rally. Balthanos and the Lady of Vines fail to kill the Vigilers, and he scores a 5-point turn, since he only holds one objective that I didn't previously control, and failed to kill my Questers. The all-important priority roll happens, and Kyle wins it. It's a tough choice, as he will give me the underdog if he seizes the initiative, and he doesn't have a ton of units in great striking position. However, Balthanos and the Lady of Vines are a little overextended, and Durthu is still pretty low health, so he elects to take the turn. In doing so, the Reclusions I had placed on the northeast objective will now have a 4-up ward due to the underdog ability, and I get to remove the treasure token that is on my nearly dead Quester unit. His hero phase is pretty uneventful. He uses a spell to finish off the last Quester, and the Lady of Vines fails to cast her 5-up ward bubble. This shows his movement phase, as he leaves Durthu to continually heal in the back and sends Alariel and Drycha to charge my portal on the southeast corner of the board. He charges Alariel into the terrain piece, and is just within 6 inches of the prosecutors, so she can pile in on the terrain piece and fight them. Drycha fails her charge, and this phase leaves me with a tough decision. I can let Alariel fight my prosecutors off the charge, where it's very possible they get stuck in combat or just wiped entirely. So I choose to countercharge them. I figure it would be better to get them in there and have their melee profile be twice as strong, instead of just Alariel piling into them and lifting the unit when she activated. I rolled an 11, which gets me into the Drycha, which could let me lift her as I take damage from Alariel. After the combat shakes out from the double turn, I lost my prosecutors as they failed to remove Drycha, and I finally lost my Vigilers in the middle as well. Kyle controls his home objective for a 5-point turn. All in all, I made it out of that double turn just fine. I was very worried about the level of damage that I would take, and it honestly could have been worse. Now, I have lost roughly 1,200 points in my army, and my opponent still has their full army on the field, but I have tons of movement, still have my Reclusions on the field, and I have a strong ability to focus on scoring points, and I unlocked the harder tactic path already by killing one of his heroes. My turn 2 is pretty passive, as I score my 1 home objective while teleporting to take the southwest objective for my first Restless tactic, and put more units in neutral territory to score my second Master the Path tactic while avoiding combat. I score 15 as I hold my home objective still, and 10 from both tactics. And that's kind of the story of the game. He kills more of my stuff than I can in return at the sacrifice of scoring points. There are scuffles on both sides of the battlefield as my resurrected Paladors take the home objective from his Durthu, and Iriden and Belthanos get into a pillow fight that lasts until the top of round 5. The Terminos and Reclusions come back to my home objective and just wreck face on the double turn from 3 to 4, smashing Alariel and Durthu after he teleports him over to assist. So, at the end of the game, I scored 50 total points with 5 of 6 tactics completed, and he only scored 35 points with 2 tactics completed. It was an incredibly close game, and I was on the back foot after his early double turn from round 1 to 2, but SCE just has the ability to stay in games and even win them when down a ton of material. I also want to add, Kyle was a great opponent and had a gorgeous army. Here's a picture of his Alariel that I snagged after the match had ended. All of my games were great, with good opponents, and I couldn't have asked for a better group to play with. Now, on to Game 2. Now, I want to preface my second game and provide some context, because I think it's important to capture the essence of the army I was playing. With the release of the new Blades of Khorne battle tome came a new Army of Renown. If you're unfamiliar with Armies of Renown, they're basically a separate rule set for a faction you have chosen to play, that has new battle traits and unit restrictions for you. Khorne has a new one with their tome called the Gore-Chosen Champions. The Gore-Chosen Champions AOR is filled entirely with Khorne mortal heroes. These are a bunch of little dudes on 3-up saves and 6 health apiece that have 4 damage 3 attacks apiece, plus a couple of heroes that have army-wide buffs like the Bloodscrater or your priest like the Realm Gore Ritualist. Oh, and the battle traits give the heroes a little something too to make up for the inability to bring any other units. What do they get, you might ask? Oh, they just get an army-wide 4-up ward, crit mortal on all their weapons, and for every single foot dude, the first time he would die on a 5-up just doesn't. In case you were wondering, yeah, that's pretty strong. And my army just doesn't have the damage to work through it. A 3-up save already isn't great for my Paladors and Prosecutors. A 4-up ward cuts my already low damage in half, and a third of the time, the thing I'm fighting just doesn't die. Crit Mortal also just cuts back through my army like butter, and he has enhancements to boost the attacks, and also give units strike first to offset my offensive turns. So, knowing that this is an awful matchup for me into a purely ridiculous army, this is what deployment looked like. I'm highly skewed to one side, and since we're playing on Grasping Thorns, where the underdog ability lets me tie units down to objectives, I deployed off on all the objectives intentionally to take the underdog early and try and win on the primary. To be honest, this game doesn't really need a play-by-play like my game with Sylvaneth in the previous round. To kind of sum up why, I've jumped ahead to the bottom of turn 2, where the score is 21-8, with me ready to fully send my army into his flank. After 3 activations of my Lord Terminos, Reclusions, and fully buffed Prosecutors, I did a total of 15 damage across 3 heroes, and only killed one of them. As a cherry on top of that, I lost the entire unit of Prosecutors, half the Reclusions, and Iriden before he even got to activate. If that doesn't sum up the massive mountain I was already trying to climb in this matchup, I don't know what does. I try and keep it as close as possible, getting a 20-point turn bottom of 3, but I just ran out of gas by turn 5. 41-66 is the final score, with 2 tactics for me and 4 for my opponent. On to the next round. My opponent in the third round is Adam, and he is bringing Fire Slayers. Adam and I have both been at several events of this store, but this is the first time that we'll be able to play against each other ever. He has a 5 Magmadroth list with the new Scourge of Ghyran Rune Suns on Magmadroths, which are just so strong in the current meta. He is playing with the Intercept and Recover and Restless Energy tactics. We are playing on Linked Ley Lines, which has 5 objectives, creating a plus sign in the middle of the board, with scoring for 1, more, a pair, and holding all 3 in a line. I outdrop him, so let's get into deployment. Pretty simply, he lines all his droths up on the line, keeps his 2 small foot units and the Rune Master back around his forge. I deploy most of my units on the line and prepare myself to take the first turn. Similarly to the game against Sylvaneth, my plan is to cripple his army early, and leave him with too few units to contest and threaten my army on the punchback. After my movement phase, I have sent my Prosecutors through the portal, ran up my Reclusions to hold an objective with the Terminos, ran the Paladors straight up the center of the board, and dropped my Vigilers and Questers to hold the center line of objectives. I also put a ton of shooting into his Droth with his Mount trait and artifact, as well as his Rune Sun also takes some damage from the Prosecutors shooting. Into my charge phase, I make all my charges, but unfortunately my Paladors don't roll high enough to stay away from the Runefather, which allows him to countercharge me with the Father to buff all his sons that are in combat. In order to ensure that I can confirm the kill on the Mag Son with the artifact and trait, I all-out attack and pick up the Droth to the wound. I also fight and destroy the Magma Droth with the buff Prosecutors, but I lose all of the Paladors, and the Prosecutors are super out of position. I really needed those Paladors to survive. Now, unlike my Sylvaneth game, I don't have any units remaining to pin the last 3 Droths in place. On his turn, he's able to move up with his remaining 3 Droths and break out of my failed attempt at caging his army in deployment. After his charge phase, he's crashed into my Prosecutors, Quester Soulsworn, and my Brick of Reclusions. He lifts the Prosecutors, Vigilers, and all but one of my Quester, and loses 1 Magma Droth in return. After turn 1, the score is 15-11 in my favor, but I have again just run out of gas. And this time I won't be able to claw myself back into the game. I win the priority into turn 2, manage a 20-point turn with Airden taking his home objective while the Reclusions and Terminos swing over to fight over the middle objective. The Quester teleports away to safety as he has one of those intercept treasures. After turn 2, Adam scores 18 points and has now removed my Reclusions and the Paladors that I had returned to the battlefield in turn 2. This is where the game really starts to just take a turn. Whereas in my Sylvaneth game, where I kept the Reclusions at full strength till turn 4, I've already lost them at the end of round 2 and just don't have the movement tricks to take objectives since they're so clustered together in the middle of the board. After 3 more suboptimal turns from me and Adam basically max scoring his way out, the game ends. After the dust settles, the final score is 62-74, where I scored 4 tactics to Adam's 6. It was a great game that ended with plenty of time left on the clock. I definitely could have played it differently, but was fine with a quick game that was close, as I was just trying to avoid tilting too hard after my tough matchup round 2. So, I'm 1-2 after day 1. James is also 1-2 after day 1, which is great. He's already done better than last year. And Ian is 3-0 after 3 tight games. This is awesome, as he has already achieved his goal and has his eyes set on the prize. So, we head back to Ian's house for the night, reflect on our wins and losses and the basics of what we could do better, have dinner, and hit the hay early to be ready for day 2. As we head back to the store in the morning, everyone adjusts their expectations for the day. I want to win out to go 3-2 on the weekend. James wants to pick up another game, and Ian is looking to 4-1 at a minimum. As we set these goals and make it to the event, pairings go up and we see who we're playing round 4. My round 4 opponent is Spencer and his Sons of Behemoth army. He's in the King Broad Stomp, which gives King Broad a 5-up bodyguard to any other unit in the army and has a unique set of rampages. He has a core of 3 units of King Broad, a Beast Smasher, and a War Stomper, and 4 little Gargants to take objectives and serve as wound pools for Broad. I outdrop him as well, thanks to the roll-off, and he goes first. Importantly, we're playing on cyclic shifts, which is a plan that is very spread out and lets the underdog turn off pairs of objectives, which is huge for me as I outclass him by a lot when it comes to movement. Here's the deployment setup. The Gargants are deployed very close as they want to focus their damage and control in the center of the board, and he leaves a baby Gargant on either side to take objectives. I'm castled in the center to match his deployment, with my Paladors off to one side, my Questers ready to take the objective just outside of my zone. This game ends up being incredibly close, where I jump to an early lead on the back of an early double from the turns 1 to 2 while using my Paladors to dominate one of the flanks, and trading the Prosecutors out into the War Stomper for some okay damage. We both punctuate our turn 3 with 20-point turns each, and into the turn 5 priority, we're tied at 56 points each. At the end of the day, I just have more units on the board than Spencer, since he's left with just his solo Beast Smasher trying to take as many objectives as possible, while I just have 5 units left to ensure that I can max score on the primary in my final turn. So, at the end of the game, Spencer scores 5 to my final turn of 10 points, and I managed to squeak out a win. It was a great game that was super close, and still ended with an hour to go in the round. It gave me some time to just relax, chat with some friends, and watch the remaining games. Lunch comes and goes, and now it's time to get into my final game. And the final game's going to be a great one, playing a friend who has also chosen to bask in Sigmar's grace. Andy is Broadstorm Cast Eternals as well, and has immaculate taste as he's running the Extremist Chamber, filled with dragons and dragon-like cavalry. The SCE mirror is always fun, since we both have access to very similar movement tactics and teleporting. We're on Life Cycle, which is an interesting plan with an underdog ability that only really matters in the first turn. The underdog gets to select where the primary objective will start, which also dictates the order of the rotation of the primary. Since I outdrop Andy, I will be planning on underscoring him to guarantee I can select where the objective will swing. Deployment looks pretty similar for both of us, and since I have slightly more movement with my prosecutors and paladors, I'm leaning more towards the middle of the board, whereas Andy has elected to favor one side so his army can back up his Stormdrake Guard, which can be pretty terrifying when left unchecked. This game was another nail-biter until the very end. Andy scored 6 points on turn 1, and in response I played very passively and scored 4, which allowed me to start the primary on the objective that Andy's entire army was on. Why did I do that? Well, my army is slightly more mobile and flexible than his, which means I can afford to track down the objective from basically anywhere, and try and hold Andy up to his side of the board and allow me to win on the primary objective. So, after his movement phase, he's left with a tough charge into my Paladors with his Stormdrake Guard, due to my 5-inch redeploy and the big bases of the guard keeping them from moving the maximum that they could. He doesn't make any of his 2 big charges, and our Paladors and his Questor enter combat where he kills 2 Paladors and allows me to pull them out of combat range so they're free to move on my turn. Bottom of round 2 is my big swing. Because his dragons were out of position, he had to use his Beacon of his Ear to teleport them away, leaving the Knight Relictor to eat some fully charged prosecutors when they took the objective, which just gives me a massive 20-point turn, putting the score at 24-13. The game continued, with Andy continuously picking up my units, while I just kept trying to play the objective, holding on to a narrow lead until round 4, where I finally won the priority roll and elected to double, keeping myself in control of the objectives and scoring a 10-point turn. At the bottom of round 4, Andy elected to double me to remove my final units on my home objective, which was also finally the primary, but at that point he had locked himself out of scoring any more tactics, and only had a 3-point lead at the end of his turn. On my final turn, I managed to score 12, with just Yrden and the Paladors remaining, putting the final score at 56-47, with my 4 tactics to Andy's 3. As always, when I play Andy, it was a wonderful contest for Sigmar's favor, which, win or lose, I enjoyed immensely. So, at the end of the tournament, I managed to put together a scrappy 3-2 record, while chalking up my 2 losses to strong opponents or busted armies. James pulled out a win on day 2, setting himself at 2-3 on the weekend, which is a huge improvement from his previous showing. Oh, and Ian? Ian found himself playing on the table for first place, putting on a truly impressive showing, ending the tournament 4-1 and just battling through tough matchups the entire time. Now, in a constructive manner, I like to reflect on what I brought to the tournament, what worked well, what needs improvement in list building or playing, and what changes I'll make to my list. Let's start with the positives. The first big winner of my list was the Terminus and Reclusions. While the Fight First trick is very transparent, some armies still just don't have a way to get around it and have to just eat it for a turn. The Reclusions in particular are just an absolute brick wall, and I definitely plan on bringing more of them to Nova. Yrden was also a fun piece, and having access to multiple priests was definitely a positive for consistency of important prayers. However, flying monsters without any shooting protection are just super vulnerable in the current meta, so Yrden may not be long for my list. I also had a great time with the Questor Soulsworn, as they were just another brick with a solid stat profile and good once per game to score tactics. On the other end of the spectrum, I was pretty consistently let down by the Paladors and Prosecutors. Let's start with the Paladors. Yes, they are super fast and pretty durable, but into a meta of largely 3-up saves and super tanky things like Rotgut Tragus or 10 Chosen, they just don't do a lot of damage, and the damage that is done can be swingy. Speed's a virtue and movement wins games, but I can't be spending 500 points on something that doesn't do 500 points worth of damage. As for the Prosecutors, the damage wasn't terrible, and they reliably made every charge I needed them to throughout the weekend. The problem's not the damage, it's their frailty. Incidental mortal damage and rampages just flatten them, and their 4-up ignore once per turn isn't enough to protect them. Their flying ability leaves them super vulnerable to shooting. I only had one instance where they were actually able to attack as a full unit of 6. For 300 points, I need something that can stick around a little better than them. So what changes am I making to the list? Well, you'll have to see my video breakdown of the Nova Open to find out. You can be sure that Prosecutors and Paladors won't be making the cut this time, and neither will Yrden. I think he's great, but he's just too fragile to shooting to want to risk losing him to the new KO stuff. But, am I supposed to play a list with a big, awesome centerpiece? We'll have to find out. All in all, this was an awesome tournament. It was a great time while also being a great learning experience for me. I was having a hard time before this tournament finding a list to play, and this gave me a ton of experience with what I liked and what I didn't, and gave me great insight on what to change for the Nova Open in a couple of weeks. So that was my weekend playing Age of Sigmar early this August. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you stayed around long enough for this part of the video. Please tell me if you enjoyed it, and let me know if you want to see more of this kind of report, especially for Nova. I'll work on taking more actual pictures of the games. It's just so easy to get caught up in the game and forget to take photos for each movement and charge phase. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more AOS content this fall.